Back, we're discussing political dynasties, partisan politics, and pricey elections. Still with me in studio, Jane Hall, a veteran journalist who teaches journalism at American University. Simon Marks is the president and chief correspondent for Feature Story News, and Lara Brown is director of the graduate programs in political management at George Washington University. Lara, before we get to the money in elections, let's look at another part of the American political system. In Congress, two parties dominate the system here, the Democrats, of course, and the Republicans. Now, save for independents, every single member of Congress, from the House or the Senate, belong to one of these two parties, right?
Well, for the most part. We do have independents that have been elected, but they caucus with one or the other party. And really, this is about a twofold decision issue at the district level. Basically, good, ambitious politicians want to be associated with a party that's going to win. Third parties have a difficult time winning. Voters also don't want to waste their vote on a candidate that's not going to win. So what happens is those two things combine in such a way that everyone selects or opts into one major party or the other.
And Simon, I mean, we do have smaller parties in the United States, the Tea Party, for instance, but they campaign under the banner of the Republican Party. Is the system designed in such a way to squeeze out the little guy?
Well, I mean, there are little guys out there, and there are little guys running for the presidency. I mean, there are Green Party candidates for the presidency and Independence Party candidates for the presidency. There's a move underway right now to change the rules governing the televised presidential debates, with some of these smaller parties and smaller independent candidates arguing that that's a complete carve-up between the Republican and the Democratic parties, and urging members of the public to back a move for change. But realistically, meaningfully, is anything likely to change in this election cycle? No, it's not. I mean, this is a classic two-party system with very little indication, because of the need for national organization that you have to succeed, that anything's going to change.
Well, Jane, as Simon says, a classic two-party system. It's a very cozy system, isn't it?
Well,
and I want to ask you, to what extent does the media fit into that cozy little system?
I think the media are highly culpable in perpetuating the two-party system. I mean, and they're also highly culpable in promoting and giving coverage to Donald Trump, who is very unlikely. I saw a poll of Republican primary voters from NBC News, Wall Street Journal. 2/3 of those people said they wouldn't consider running for him. You would never know that from the coverage.
But he's going to get lots of international coverage, right?
Vast amounts of international coverage.
But he has no chance other than that he's interesting.
Right. But you know what, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the Republican Party. The truth is, his spectacle will gain a lot of attention and bring people to those debates. And so whether or not different candidates can sort of maximize that opportunity for themselves could end up being very good for the Republican Party in the long term.
But if you run those remarks he made about Mexican immigrants, that's not good for the Republican Party.
No, but if you're a candidate who denounces him on stage in a debate, and you make it, as we say, his sister soldier moment, which refers to a moment that Bill Clinton did in 1992 against a rap artist who was supported by Jesse Jackson's organization. It's important.
But the danger of Trump, though, is in a crowded field of Republican candidates, where the debate organizers are saying only 10 can sit around the table for any debate. Right. You know, if Trump makes enough noise that he becomes one of those 10 because he's polling sufficiently substantially, he takes time away potentially from other candidates who may make more substantive points on the campaign trail. And, you know, talk about the money, Trump's got loads of it. Right. A $5 billion election with, so far, absolutely no real substantive discussion of policy. Sweeping statements from Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush, it's morning in America all over again, but not much discussion of granular policy.
Right, Lara, let's get to the money. $5 billion, we've heard that figure. I mean, in an American election, it's all determined by who has more money, right?
Well, it's not. I mean, one of the things that is very true is that money is what buys television advertisements. That's mostly what it goes toward in U.S. elections. And when you actually study who is persuaded by TV ads, what you find is those people who are the least likely to see them are the most likely to be persuaded. So for the most part, what we're really talking about is those television ads are speaking to the choir. Those people who already voted, who are already intending to vote, they're the ones who watch political ads. Those people who are not likely to vote and have no interest in voting are really the only ones who would be influenced by them.
All right, Simon, there's vast amounts of money going to the candidates. What do the donors want in return?
Well, that's a huge question, isn't it? I mean, it's a quid pro quo, clearly. I mean, if you have a political system that is totally fueled by money that is being funneled to you from private donors, most of those private donors are not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. Right. They're looking for a payoff on the other side. Yeah. I mean, I will say, though, that money is not the deciding factor. If it were, we would all be looking fondly back, or perhaps not so fondly back, on the presidency of a Republican by the name of Phil Gramm, who once had so much money, when he leapt into the presidential race, came out and declared that money was the mother's milk of American politics. In his case, it was the mother's milk, but it wasn't the infant formula because he didn't have the ideas to attract the voters. And so you've got to, you need the money, you need the backers, but you also need the ideas that once you get into office, the backers hope will put you in a position to help them out.
You also would have seen Howard Dean win the 2004 Democratic nomination, and he did not. He fell apart in his campaign in Iowa, and very quickly that race closed around John Kerry. So one of the other aspects of this is politics and campaigning is a lot more than just the money.
But I just want to say, as a person who teaches young people, there's a lot of polling that shows young people think politics is dirty. That in this country, they think they'd be better off working for an NGO. As I said, they turned out for Obama. Whether they didn't turn out, God knows, for the midterm elections in this country. I can't help but believe that the coziness you were talking about and the money and the negative ads, maybe it doesn't persuade anybody, maybe it doesn't keep them away from the polls, but it contributes to a mood in this country that it's rigged, that money buys the office, even though it doesn't really buy the office. There's a cynicism that...
But Obama did actually waive off the public financing. So he in fact was the first one to really basically say, I'm not going to be part of this system.
Okay, Simon, with all this money floating around, I mean, is it only entrenched interests that benefit? What about the poor guy, the ordinary worker?
The cynicism is totally justified. In 2011, I went down to Tampa to do a site survey for coverage of the Republican convention that was taking place there. And I found myself looking at various buildings in Tampa with glorious views of the riverfront, the harbor area, alongside a representative from a major American telecommunications company. And we spent the day talking and getting to know one another. And at one point I said to him, so what's your aim here, as he looked to buy up riverfront property for the convention? And he looked at me and he said, my aim during the Republican convention is to make sure that absolutely no member of Congress has to buy their own meal. That's, of course there's cynicism. There should be cynicism.
Well, you call it cynicism. Why isn't this corruption?
It is borderline. It is borderline corruption.
But part of it is that money also follows votes. We always assume that the causal arrow goes from this idea of money to the later vote. The truth of the matter is people who give money and give exorbitant amounts of money, they tend to give it only to the people who agree with them. So one of the things that's important to realize is these people are reinforcing their own beliefs with candidates who already align with their positions. You would not see somebody like a David Geffen, who contributes a great deal of money on the Democratic side, giving to a Republican. He just wouldn't do that. It would be a waste of his money, and he knows that he could not, if you will, buy a Republican to vote with him. He'd rather put all of his money to support a Democrat to try to beat a Republican.
Jane, is it likely that the finance laws governing campaign finance will change?
Well, I don't know. Bernie Sanders has called for a constitutional amendment, and Hillary Clinton's been talking about it. Hillary Clinton's in this very odd position of having a lot of ties to Wall Street, but maybe doesn't need Wall Street as much now, and so she's doing the populist message. People care about, the thing that troubles me is people care about climate change. And, I think that, I'm not here to talk about Bernie Sanders as you should vote for him, but he is actually talking about things that people say they care about. And the fact that that is a surprise that he gets support is also evidence to me of something's wrong kind of with the system that we have.
Right. Simon, I got 40 seconds. Just for comparison, $5 billion, United States. What's the situation like in the United Kingdom?
I mean, I don't know what the British election cost, but I can tell you it was an infinitesimal fraction of that $5 billion. And the key issue is no advertising on television. The only airtime you get as a political party in Britain is given to you. It's must carry what we call party political broadcasts. The absence of the need to go out there and raise money for those television campaigns makes an enormous difference to the quality of the conversation.
And a much shorter campaign.
And, well, yes, although longer than it should be now in the UK, but traditionally a 3-week campaign,
right,
as opposed to, what are we into now? You know, 2 years, basically.
Okay, Simon Marks, Jane Hall, Lara Brown, thanks to all of you for joining us.